Hi guys, in this video today I'm going to go over some potential ways that you can deal with emotional triggers or emotional flashbacks. So what are some causes of emotional triggers? Trauma, any sort of trauma. It could be childhood trauma, it could be narcissistic or cluster B or sociopathic abuse trauma. It could be from any sort of trauma. And really, it's very natural for humans to want to protect themselves or their sort of inner child. And what will happen if you are being triggered, you will feel threatened, right? When you feel threatened, you are going to get, or it's possible that you're going to get triggered. And so how does the body, respond to an emotional trigger? Well, it really depends upon the person, but it's going to be one of four main responses: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And remember, fawn is sort of like the codependence, right? Like people pleasing, accommodating. What can I do to fix this? How can I make this better for the person? So what happens when you are in an emotional trigger is, first, you're going to get flooded with all sorts of hormones, and definitely with cortisol, right? You get a rush of cortisol through your body. And, it could be that you're going to have you're going to get nauseous. You could be sweaty, dizzy, lightheaded. You could feel really hot. You could have heart palpitations. You can have numbing, pins and needles. For some people, they have an inability to talk. You can feel a panic attack, anxiety. You can't move. You feel like you're having a heart attack. This is because when you're in a state of trigger and your nervous system and your brain and your body are feeling threatened, again, it's going to be a rush of cortisol, which is like the stress hormone. It's the hormones that are helping you to quote unquote manage stress. And you can become either super hyper vigilant. Some people will shut down. Others will sort of disassociate, right? So fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. What causes emotional triggers? Well, really, it can be a number of different things. I'm going to sort of relate it to sort of more narcissistic abuse, but it could be from, many things could cause it. People can cause it, situations can cause it. Somebody, if somebody has a conflicting belief that you feel is threatening your belief system, right? It could be noise, smell. It could be going to a place that reminds you of a bad memory or a person. It could, it could be, this actually, for some people, for like sexual abuse survivors, actually having sex can actually be a trigger. You'll find a lot of times with sex abuse survivors is that they need to be sort of in control during sex. If they feel out of control or somebody is like overpowering them, it can be very, very traumatizing. You can also, if sort of with regards to narcissists, if you get, an email from them, a phone call, if you see them on social media, or if you get, one of their flying monkeys, one of their, buddies, friends, or family, especially one thing that you might find especially triggering, or I did anyway, is if your experience of narcissistic abuse is being invalidated by the flying monkeys or the family, and they're not doing anything to find out what the truth is. They're just, believing, la, 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 my narcissist is, son or daughter is just perfectly fine. They're wonderful. And it must be that person's fault, right? Rather than finding out what the truth is. So if, you might get triggered if you're being invalidated by some of the narcissist flying monkeys. Also, if you're divorcing a cluster B personality disordered person, you're probably going to be triggered all the time because you're going to get emails from the attorney, and that might be triggering. You can get emails from the narcissist, and of course, that's going to likely be triggering. Some people get triggered when they go to like an old cafe or restaurant where they used to eat with the narcissist. It could be a number of different things. So how do you deal with emotional triggers? Well, let's go over some ways. First of all, let's talk about before. What are some things that you can do before your amygdala gets hijacked, before your body is flooded with stress hormones, before you're feeling that intense anxiety, hypervigilance, fear, or, terror, or you're shutting down, you're numb, you can't function? what do you do before that? Well, first of all, identifying the emotional trigger is really, really important. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to calm down this hypersensitive stress response, right? So one thing that is very helpful is to make a list or an inventory of potential triggering situations, people, places, or things. In my case, I actually made a poster board and I put all my triggers, hearing from the narcissist, an email, a phone call, social media, hearing from one of the narcissist's flying monkeys, getting invalidated by one of the narcissist's flying monkeys, hearing from my divorce attorney. Like, these were all the ways in which I was being triggered. And so I wrote the list, and sometimes I would add to the list. Sometimes it was like, okay, driving down the street where the where I used to live with the narcissist. So I wrote down all of these triggers. And then the most simple thing to do straight off the bat is, especially if you are in the middle of like divorce, or you're in the middle of this, awful situation, still having to engage with the narcissist if you can't go no contact. The most basic thing you can do is avoid those triggers. Avoid the situations that may trigger you. Avoid going to, if you think that you're going to get triggered if you go to a restaurant where you used to eat with the narcissist, don't go to that restaurant. If you think you're going to get triggered if you hear from one of the flying monkeys, you can tell them, look, I can't talk to you because I get triggered. Or you can also just block them if they're toxic people. A lot of times these narcissists come from families of other narcissists and sociopaths. So, it's possible that they're all toxic, right? Usually the family environment is definitely toxic. And a lot of times they're in total denial about that toxicity. So you have to also ask yourself, like, are these people that I even want in my life? Like, are these people that are self-aware? Are they doing introspection? Or do they have moral values? Do they have a moral compass? Or is this like a whole family of people that have no moral values, no moral compass? They just don't even care. There's no right or wrong for them. They're all moral relativists. Like, if that's the case, then you have to really question what kind of relationship you want with these people. Now, sometimes you might be in a relationship with a narcissist or sociopath, and they may have some very good family members that are very, they could be very decent people. They could have high moral standards. They could, be also against lying and cheating and infidelity. They could be like not in support of that, or they could be, you just don't know. But even then, if they're really good people, you can even still tell them, look, I get triggered when I hear from you. I know that you're a good person. I know you mean well. Eventually, maybe someday I'd like to have a relationship with you, but at this point, it's just too triggering for me. Like, that is a clean, healthy boundary that you can set. And then you decide if you want to be friends with them or not. And you can even decide that you don't want to be friends with them or have them in your life, even if they are good people, because you just don't want to have that, that you just don't want to be triggered. And you can tell them that, look, I think you're a wonderful person. I know that you didn't have anything to do with this, but because I get triggered, I just don't know if we can be in relationship together. That's okay. There's a lot of really good people in this world, and you're not going to be friends with every single one of them. So the poster board, or write it down in, a sheet. So you are very clear on what is triggering you. And then as you go along through this process, you might be adding to that list. And then ask yourself, why does this trigger me? So a lot of times if you were with a narcissist, it's because, eventually, like if you were with a covert narcissist or a vulnerable narcissist, like you may have been going along, everything seemed fine. And then all of a sudden, you discover that they had a double life. They were having affairs, pornography addiction, drug addiction, who knows what, right? But then that creates a lot of cognitive dissonance and a lot of trauma to the brain. A lot of people get complex PTSD. So maybe it's like I drive down the street where I used to live with that person, and it makes me feel really unsafe. I get flooded with terror, and I'm really scared. And maybe that's because this narcissist they could have been physically dangerous, and you're afraid for your physical safety. Or it could be that the emotional pain was so intense parents because you thought they were this one way, and then it turned out that they were not a good person. They were awful. They did awful things to you. And so maybe that emotional pain was so extreme that, that's what's triggering you. You have a fear of that emotional pain. You really want to, avoid it, right? So, why is this triggering me? Well, I went to a cafe where I used to eat with the narcissist. It brought up all sorts of bad memories, or it brought up good memories, and they're really conflicting because I'm having a hard time with the, good memories that I have of that narcissist with the reality of who they turned out to be. So it's creating a lot of cognitive dissonance and like pain in my brain. So, so keep in mind that a trigger is a natural response to a perceived threat. It may or may not be a real threat, right? But for some reason, you're primed for that threat. So it's a totally natural response. Don't shame yourself if you're in a triggered state or if you're getting triggered. That's a natural human response. But what can you do? So that's sort of some of the stuff that you can do beforehand. Also, you can do trauma therapy. I think it's huge. You can do EMDR. You can do transcranial magnetic stimulation. There's all sorts of therapeutic trauma therapies that you can do before you're actually in a triggered trauma state. So you can learn to start controlling and avoiding and dealing with those original wounds that sort of caused the trigger, right? But what do you do? So that's some stuff you can do before you're being triggered. But what do you do when you're actually in the moment? How do you deal with this? Well, in the moment, it is very helpful because keep in mind, your amygdala gets hijacked, your lizard brain kicks in, your survival instincts kick in. It's like fight, flight, freeze, fawn. I mean, you are no longer, your brain, your actual intellectual conscious brain is no longer running the show. Your primitive brain has kicked in and it is running the show, and it's telling you that there's a threat and you need to get safe, right? It's trying to protect you. It's your little brain, your darling little brain trying to protect you. But one thing that's going to help you is start to identify it. When you're in the state of trigger, when you're being triggered, you can say to yourself, oh, right now I am being triggered. So I'm going to give you an example. A lot of you guys know I survived an earthquake avalanche in Nepal in 2015, and it was gnarly, right? And for about 6 months to a year after that, when I would hear like a garbage truck drive by, I would like crouch down because it sounded like the rock fall that we experienced when we were in that country. It was terrifying to me, and it was my trauma response. So one thing that helped me is I could say in that moment, I can say, that is a garbage truck. I am not in an earthquake avalanche. I am safe right now. And start to, one thing that is really important is get into where you actually are. Like, realize that you're in the middle of a trigger, and you can say to yourself, I'm in, my town. It is, Friday and 5 p.m. That is a garbage truck that just drove by because they're picking up their garbage on their normal schedule. Like, you can start grounding by getting yourself into the actual moment of reality of where you are. Because again, in this case, this is my, instinct, my survival instinct, my trauma response is kicking in. But in this case, it's a perceived threat. And you can say, I'm safe right now. I am in the moment. That is not an earthquake avalanche, right? So then some other things you can do is you can start taking deep breaths. And this is super important. I mean, even if you can do there's different ones you can do, but you can breathe in and breathe out, like almost like with power, like breathe in, or do even tiger's breath. I know I'm being silly, but I don't care. You can also breathe in like this with your pursed lips and then out through your nose. Deep breaths, super, super important. You can tap. You can start doing some tapping. You can do some tapping, above your eyebrow. You can do some tapping beneath your eye. You can do some tapping right here as you're breathing. You can take your palms and you can push them into your eyes. push them into your eyes as you're breathing deeply. These are just some of the things that you can do. And because again, you're trying to get your body back to a relaxed muscle state. But before you do that, it's really important that you try to orient yourself to space and time. Okay. Reality, what's really happening. You can say, I'm at my house. It's Thursday at 4 p.m. and I'm on the couch. I just had tea. I just talked to my mother. Like, I'm safe. So you're trying to engage your higher brain and kind of get back into the moment, time and place. And then, because something important to note is your body cannot actually tell the difference between the real threat and the perceived threat. So you have to engage your higher brain to instruct your body about what's real and what's fantasy, right? And what's, really happening. And then obviously some things you can do, and I should have mentioned these before, but some things you can do that are sort of preventative is, daily yoga, daily meditation, really doing, deep breathing in yoga. So it kind of becomes a natural thing to, as you go throughout your day, to do a lot of deep breathing. You can stand up, you can move your body around, you can shake your arms, you can shake your hands, you can, just get in your body. You can do some jumping jacks. You can, I worked with a somatic body worker and he had me take a bat and, smash it onto a cube. It's almost like a cloth cube, but it's pretty solid. And it was just a way to get that, that trigger out of my body, take the bat and obviously I don't want you to do that if you're going to destroy or hurt any property, but some people even get a punching bag. That's very helpful. Just keep in mind that, this whole time that this is happening, your brain and your body are trying to protect yourself, right? And the truth is, if you were if you experienced child abuse or childhood trauma, that was real. If you experienced narcissistic abuse that was either physical, verbal, emotional, or psychological, that was real. That was real abuse, so don't get me wrong. I'm not minimizing the reality of what you went through. That was absolutely real. But if you're getting triggered emotionally after the actual events, then that is usually a perceived threat. Now, obviously, some sociopaths or psychopaths, narcissists or whatever, they could actually be physically threatening you. You could be in real danger. And of course, if that is the case, call 911. I'm not suggesting, obviously being able to identify what is a real threat. If a narcissist or sociopath is banging on your door, that is a real threat. If they're stalking you, that is a real threat. But if you're getting this emotional flashback when you're driving your car, you're by yourself, you drive by the street you used to live and you get triggered, that's what I'm talking about as being a perceived threat. It's really important that you can calm your nervous system down. You calm your brain down. You calm your amygdala. You just get into a deep state of calm, and breathing is just so effective. So I hope that this has been helpful for you. I'm learning a lot about trauma and about how to heal complex PTSD. So these are just some of the things that I'm learning. So I hope you guys have a really, really wonderful day, and I will check in soon. Bye.